It is so exciting to be here today. I am Adrienne Mansfield, co-founder of the Adage Marketing Group, and I am with the head of business development for Rubrik, Evan. And we're going to be talking about how data disrupts within the senior living industry. So, Evan, do you want to get started by telling us a little bit about Rubrik and what you guys do?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for having me, Adrienne. I feel like we've known each other for quite a while,
Yeah.
and have enjoyed working with you and the rest of the Adage team. So a little bit about Rubrik is we had built our suite of offerings off of the idea of Google is not helpful in any decision-making process, especially in highly complex emotional ones. You throw in a little bit of medical in there and it becomes even more of a mess. We all know that idea of the WebMD effect, where you have a growth on your hand and you go to Google and you type it in. Next thing you know, 3 clicks in, you've got cancer and you have to amputate the entire arm. Imagine that, but for a decision like moving to senior living. That's crippling. And I'm not even in that decision process. And I can just see how overwhelming and how scary it can become. And so where I'm going with this is we figured, well, what if there was a way that we could build a tool that instead of them be the onus relying on the family to know what to seek out, what if there was a tool that would ask them a series of questions, and then based on how they answer the questions, give them the right resources and the right opportunities and the right ways to move forward. And so there's really 3 main areas that we focus in on, which is the idea of motivational interviewing. So understanding who are they, where are they, what are they looking for, what are those values and preferences being number 2, what's important to them. If we can get that right and we can really sprinkle in some education along the way, then it comes down to illuminating the path ahead. How do we eliminate that fear of not knowing what's coming next and giving them potential avenues that they can go down to help them make an informed, educated, and motivate them along the way, but ultimately through empowerment to take a next step, whatever that might be. We build decision support tools that live on senior living providers' websites to help engage and inform and motivate older adults and family members who are unsure about what level of care, what type of senior living makes the most sense.
I have been a huge fan of Rubrik since I first came across it with a client, probably, I would say it's been a while, probably 6 or 7 years ago, years ago. And I know that from a marketing and sales alignment perspective, the ability to transmit that information of what is the person actually struggling with and who is this person and what matters to them, getting that information to the salesperson, it's always been a challenge. And the idea of decision-making tools is something that we've kind of hard copy created over the years, trying to help salespeople help families. And Rubrik is able to slide in there long before, kind of in that dark funnel phase, from when the time they find us until the time they're ready to move. You guys are there to inform and educate and keep them moving forward. I specifically enjoy when and I use Rubrik when I walk through the survey, when I share it with clients. And often I'm pointing out to them, do you see this little tip down here? Did you catch this little extra insight over here? It is value rich, without a doubt. And so I think it complements nicely a very well-targeted kind of MQL approach and moves it over into that, how can we leverage and maximize for conversions with those SQLs?
Yeah, I completely agree with you in the sense that I think what the industry and any industry, not just senior housing, but any industry needs to really think about, not just like say think about, but really sit down and think about, which is that buyer's journey. And I think too frequently people assume the buyer's journey is linear. And in some industries, yeah, maybe it is. I mean, Amazon, great. Just remind them, hey, you got the shopping cart. You want to check out? I was having a conversation with Jody Roberts at Senior Services of America. And one of the things she said is, there is no shopping cart in senior living. You can't just like re-poke them and say, hey, did you want to check out now? It's not like that. The analogy that I've kind of used a lot is the decision to make this take it a step further. I like that you called it a dark funnel or a dark period.
Yeah, we did a
Just-
whole blog on the dark funnel because there's that period where we just lose them for a little while.
Yeah.
And that's where they're looking at reviews, they're doing self-surveys, they're identifying if what they perceived about us on that first touch is going to match up with what they ultimately need from us in that moment of truth.
Yeah. And so I'm now processing what you meant by dark funnel, because I refer to that period as kind of like this like highway. And it's kind of a navigation that people that get on. And that highway might be different for everybody. It might be more back roads, who knows? But there's
Construction zones.
we're just going to give a whole bunch of different analogies. There's a few things that it's marketing's job to think through and make sure occurs for that person driving down that road. And the first one is make sure that there are signs. Make sure that there are signs to help them navigate themselves that you have set up to kind of guide them in the direction that they ultimately are going to end up going, but also give them a GPS. I feel like marketing is so resistant to allowing folks to make their own decisions. And I don't want to provide that resource, because what if that convinces that prospect that they actually don't need us? What if I give the pricing and they don't understand the pricing because there's so much that goes into it? What if I don't want to show pictures of what it's like in my community, because there are people with canes and walkers, and it's a senior living community. Of course, there's going to be canes and walkers. What people are ultimately looking for is that transparency. They want to know, what is life in your community like? Give them the resources so that they can self-guide themselves. And in the speed that they want to go. Especially, and we were talking about this before we get on, this generation and this group of people that are actively seeking these communities out are used to Google. They're used to going on and finding the information that they need at their fingertips. And so it's up to the marketing teams to figure out how can we get them that information and trust that they will make a good decision.
Yeah, and I like the idea of one of the things I support a lot of my clients on is empowering the self-disqualification process.
Yeah,
is not a bad thing. Leading with your pricing, one, shows transparency and a firm foundation of value. If I'm willing to stand on this price and I'm willing to put that out there, then I have confidence that I'm going to deliver on that value. And one of the things that I actually have been articulating with one of my clients is the concept of, like you had said, a self-guided tour that essentially is a map to the move, but with the resources already built in and a pre-built timeline that creates, I use the term manufactured urgency. If they understand that even for the adult children, most of our residents they've made the decision within 18 months and they realize that their parent is outside that, they're going to start to manufacture some urgency. And I think collaterals and marketing materials are the key to creating rapport in relationships too. If I use the information I find in a Rubrik survey, say in regards to continence, which is a very sensitive subject, instead of having to have that whole conversation again, if I'm able to, through marketing automation, digitally delivering a lot of those files, like you said, they're used to Google, having a resource library within your website, walking through that part of your customer journey, how helpful is your site to actually use as a resource tool, and then positioning your salespeople as this very clearly oriented and well-prepared team to help whatever the challenges that family is seeking. I think that all of those things kind of go together to synergistically build a deeper relationship.
I couldn't agree with you more. I like so I don't like this story, but at the same time, I do like this story that we'll talk a little bit about what you had just said. I got to talk to a prospect of one of our clients by accident. He was looking for his mom to move her into an assisted living community in Colorado. And he owned an active adult community and he came across our tool. And so he went through it, filled out the assessment, said, hey, I want to talk to somebody at the community for his mom. And what ended up happening was when the salesperson take a step back. Once somebody says, yes, I want to talk to somebody at that community through our tool, the report gets sent over to the salesperson so that they can see exactly how this person has answered all the questions. The salesperson didn't read the report when they called this person and proceeded to ask 3 questions that the answer was already in the report. And when I talked to him, I asked, I said, how was the experience? And he said, well, it was good. And I said, you said was, so it didn't end out good. What happened? And he said, I was so excited. I got what I needed. Of course, I know the industry, but we got what we needed. And I felt like that conversation was going to be different. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I thought I wasn't going to have to tell our story again. And then all of a sudden I realized that I was going to have to tell it again when I knew that they had the story in front of them. And so I think a lot of it is also not just on the marketing side of making sure that we're giving people the ability to tell their story and to relate to it and get on that on-ramp, get off the on-ramp on the highway.
Yes.
Decision, but also making sure every single one of those stops and all of the data that's gathered along the way gets passed over to the sales team. And then we coach the sales teams on how do you use that data to help make all of those conversations that you're having much better.
So I have actually, it's funny that you say that. I have actually been working towards helping all of our clients understand that the purchase process, the experience of the sales journey, the customer journey, is start to finish. And by that, I mean, once they're residents, what's their likelihood of referring? What's the post-purchase experience? How was their resident onboarding? But going all the way back to where you are referencing in the breakdown of the very long journey, I think that those pain points, those opportunities become the opportunities. So when that person calls in and you are armed with that information, we've done it on a database level, done surveys and delivered that information back to the sales teams. When you see that that's not being utilized, it is such a monumental loss to have quid pro quo. That person gave you a ton of intimate information and you failed to meet them in that moment. And so I really believe like our sales methodology at Adage Marketing Group is EQ based. It is designed to teach people to be better at their own interpersonal emotional intelligence that will allow them to make those decisions, like you said, which resource, how to support, what to say faster and better. But on a general, when we're teaching tactics, that, you know, in previous lives, that's really disappointing to see that breakdown of communication. And can you tell me a little bit about how you integrate with the CRMs so that this information isn't just like in an email somewhere?
Yeah. So our big thing is how do we make sure we don't want to add another thing to the salesperson's plate. We want to integrate into their systems and workflows. So we integrate with all the major CRMs for the most part. I think there might be one or two that we don't have yet. So basically we will either send, if John Smith does not exist in the CRM today, when they go through the Rubrik assessment, we're going to send John Smith over into the CRM. We'll create a new record. We'll designate that, hey, they've completed the Rubrik assessment as an activity so that the marketing folks can go kind of pull reports and say, okay, they've completed it, whether we were the originator or we were a second or third touch. But then we'll also send the report so that the responses to all the questions live in the notes field within that contact record. Now, if John Smith already exists, we're not going to create a new one. We'll update the record based on the email. Now, if John Smith types his email address in wrong, there's not a whole lot we can do there. Manually have to merge those, but we'll update the record with the information that's gathered. I think the opportunity is the second, third, and fourth touches. We get a lot of those where there are people that have been in the CRM for a while and were sent a Rubrik assessment to take through an email campaign. So these might be people that have been in the system for 3-5 years that haven't really been engaged recently, which I'm going to go out on a limb and assume a lot of people have a database of leads that haven't been touched. Guess what?
Felt truly engaged. Like you said, the survey, when you're asking them for information, I've seen some of my CRMs for clients that 5-7 years old for some of our larger, CCRCs. And these people want to share their information. They'll hold on to those surveys for 6 months and then send them back. And I would love in those instances, it would be so nice if it was a digitized version like Rubrik, where it was all aggregated and easy to use. But even with my other communities who have used Rubrik, to be able to insert that as a touch point in the sales funnel, like you said with email, we've redone clients' websites to further integrate Rubrik. You and I work together, I think, on that as well, where what other places within this website can we contextually ask for this information or offer this opportunity? And so every time you leverage a tactic like that, I feel like you're going to see an additional lift, or like you said, 2 and 3 touch points.
Yeah, I think to that point is what other places. The great thing of the internet is it's like this. People are more willing to give deep amount of information
Yeah,
through a survey than they are to talk to a salesperson.
absolutely.
So I hear a lot from sales teams. I feel like the data that we're getting in the Rubrik assessment is more accurate than what they tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that question because that gets me to go down a rabbit hole. And I'm like, why do you think that is? And they're like, well, I don't know. Why do they lie to me? I'm like, they're not lying to you. It's that traditional salesperson prospect relationship. What's happening is they're scared to give you more information because they don't want you to use it against them.
So the old adage about the snake oil salesman is not incorrect. And I think that part of my driver for the EQ-based approach to sales and marketing is that they don't trust us. And rightfully so. I mean, as an industry, advertising and marketing, senior living, it doesn't really matter. Even healthcare, a lot of people have a lot of reservations, and so the first step is establishing trust and building rapport. Because until then, they will, like you said, withhold, they'll cover, they'll divert, until you've got that deep relationship.
And what's interesting is, so coming back to that question that they asked, which is why is the information in the Rubrik report feel so much more accurate? I said, you think about it. They're comfortable. They're sitting in their own home, on their couch, going through it at their own speed. There's no judgment. There's no
time to cry.
There's no pride. Yeah, they can cry it out if they get to a question that is tough. They're not worried about the system automatically coming back and say, well, I saw you answered this, this, and this. Let me tell you about a solution that can solve that, and that. That's not what's happening. That's what they're scared of. And they don't want that to happen, because at the end of the day, all they want to do is solve their problem. And they're not thinking about the solving of their problem as being, this community will solve my problem. It's a potential. It's not the community that solves the problem. It's everything that comes with it. The community is just the place.
Right. And so what are they seeking? When we do our brand development process with new clients, one of the things we talk about is, what emotions are we trying to elicit? Not in the person, but in the outcome. It's that whole idea of like manifesting. How are you going to feel when you win the lottery? Feel that way right now. Essentially, we're doing that with the brand, saying, how do you want people to feel when they're done with this decision? All right, that's our driver. Where every tone, every nuance is going to come from, I want you to feel safe. Let's say safe is our word. I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel protected. We are here to embrace you and support. And that message and that vibe comes through, I think, effectively and resonantly when it's done with authenticity. And like you said, there's an opportunity for being consistent, and there's an opportunity for breaking that down. That trust relationship where the gentleman was so invested in the next call is going to be great.
Yeah. And taking the data, and this is recent on my mind, mainly because of a webinar that I did yesterday with Chris Frankel from the Arbor Company and Scott Smith from 5-Star, where their resident engagement. I don't ever get to have those conversations. And it got me so excited to talk about how much data that's gathered in the sales and marketing process that is lost when they move over to the EHR. So all of a sudden they have decided, okay, I'm going to move into this community. And then now the resident engagement folks pick it up, and they don't know a whole lot about this prospect. So the sales team is being pulled in to help onboard, if we're going to use the typical technology stance, basically get this resident up and running and feeling comfortable within the community. But there's so much data that could have been transferred over to the HR to help that resident engagement folks understand, do they have trouble walking? Because if they do, let's move them down closer to the activities so that they feel more open to engaging in those activities. Do they have potential memory deterioration? Because let's put them in a different spot. They might not be that bad. How are they perceiving where they are currently? Because that may be different from where they actually are.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones were understanding the age breakout of who all is looking, because when you look at some of these communities, you've got 30 years worth of people. How much? So one of the things Scott said yesterday was, how much do you have in common with somebody that's 30 years younger than you?
Oh, absolutely. And affinity groups in and of themselves, segment within for affinity groups, because you can create a culture or you can deteriorate a culture based on, that segmentation and who you're cultivating.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. You brought up the one of the things we refer to as like a life story or a life bio, is one of the terms that, within the industry. I have strongly suggested, and we just recently digitized it for a client, using that as a part of the later sales process. Okay, we're getting excited. Mom's going to join us soon. I know you said it's going to be 3 or 4 months, but how about we want to get to know her and maybe start to, have her in for a few activities. Could you fill out this life story form? Send that out via email right through your CRM.
Yeah.
Right. You get all that data back. Again, like you said, it has to live somewhere. And I recently, we're working with Eldermark on their kind of front to back, from lease to, all the way through to post-purchase and EMAR. And one of the things I've seen is when we talk about like the LRV, that lifetime resident value, we break down information from, okay, here's how much it cost us to acquire them. And then here was our net while we had them. But ultimately, in the meantime, like you said, all of the investment in between, so much gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard to calculate that, that ROI on any given investment. Do you feel like when it comes to the journey that we've taken a very experiential marketing approach for 2022? Today's consumers have a high level of customization expectation. They want experiences to be curated for them. Everything should be delivered in a way, format that's their preference. If they say that they prefer everything via mail and you keep emailing them, what does that do to their relationship? So that the data is the driver there, and the connection of how do you leverage what we know into how we market and cultivate and close the sale.
Yeah. And so is the question kind of how much are we seeing the customization is important?
Yeah.
That
as well.
It's incredibly important, or at least the perception of customization.
I like that.
It sounds weird to say, okay, at least give them the perception of customization. And so what I mean by that is our assessments are all by and large the same. Mm-hmm. We ask the same questions. We have the same results. We have the same outcome, different outcomes based on the responses, but for the most part, they're all pretty similar. So it's not overly customized. However, when I say the perception of customizations, meaning we are conscious of all of these little red and yellow flags that can potentially come up in the prospect's mind at any stage as they're in our environment. And what I mean by that is our first question, we are asking a personalization question. Who are you taking this for? Mm-hmm. Are you doing it for yourself, mom, dad, grandparent, somebody else, husband, wife, really, who is it? Mm-hmm. Based on how they answer that is going to determine how we word the rest of our questions. So if they say myself, all of the pronouns are going to reference yourself. Some of the responses will be tweaked to reference what you would expect to put if you were answering a question for yourself. An example of that would be like one of the questions we ask is, do you still drive? If you were to say, I'm looking for mom, that wouldn't say, do you still drive? It would say, does she still drive? Or does she drive? We might even take out still, because depending on the community, we might not want to show that we're kind of perceiving them that there's decline. Yeah. The response there could be, one of the responses is yes, and I'm worried about it. That shows up for people who say that they're looking for someone else. However, if they are looking for themselves, it doesn't say yes, and I'm worried about it. It says yes, but I may want to stop. So again, we're still getting the same information. Mm-hmm. They are concerned about it, but they don't want to admit they're concerned about it. Mm-hmm. So knowing how are people thinking about this, and how do I make sure that all of the language and all of the messaging and all of everything I'm providing speak directly in the language that they want to receive it. Because people are so used to just getting blast advertising,
Mhm.
and it is not personalized, and they're like, skip.
Yep.
And they pay no mind to it. Instead, if you can personalize it and make it really customized, or the perception of personalization,
Mhm.
they're more open to receiving it. So words really do matter. And
Oh,
it, mhm.
absolutely. Words are the key. And we talk about it in terms of like account-based marketing, kind of at scale. We
Mhm.
want it, we want to be able to segment the database. We want to be able to kind of lump those people who have said, I'm concerned about my mom driving, into a driving course online, rather than here's how to manage medications. Right. So it's really,
I care about
yeah,
medications.
yeah,
So why
I
would I
didn't
show
click
them that?
that box, ma'am. So
Yeah.
I love that what you guys are doing essentially is just EQ driven data collection. It allows everyone along the entire path, whether it's the empowered prospect or adult child who feels like they have the resources they need, they're armed to go talk to their sister or their mom or their dad, and or the salesperson. And it arms the salesperson with that information and that insight that allows them hopefully to meet them with resonant and connective kind of rapport building activities. And to feed that back to the marketing team is essential, because we want to continue to segment in the ways and covering the topics. If I know from my rubric assessments that 80% of people are concerned about driving, I'm not going to recommend a medication management event as the marketing agency. So that information sharing is exceptional. And I've always appreciated the opportunity to report in where Rubrik has had that touch point to advance that sale, because it is absolutely essential. I know we're getting close on time for today. I want to wrap up with one question about how you would approach moving forward into 2023. How do you think that the self-discovery process and the rubric component is going to change the sales and marketing landscape for other industries within
I
our?
am going to take a step back on that and kind of lean more into what mindset should people adopt. Um, I have had quite a few conversations with Matt Stubblefield over at the Springs, and one of the things that he said to me that stuck with me after he said it was, "I assume I know nothing." And I think anybody in marketing and anybody in sales, that should be the perception, and that should be the motto that you kind of live with. Everyone's heard the quote, "Never be the smartest person in the room," because if you are, you're in the wrong room.
Mhm.
I try to assume that there's so much I don't know. And so I know, at least I know kind of within the rubric specific lens, I know like I can hold my own there, but I'm definitely not going to be able to talk about it at the same level I would with my product team, because that's all they think about.
Right.
But for marketing, what I mean by that is if you have assumptions, test them, because your assumptions, I promise you, are probably not correct. They may be, and I hope they are. But wouldn't you want to know before you really leaned into it? And what I mean by that is we have a client, and this is my last client story. And what I mean by test assumptions. This is on a specific client, and then I'll back it up and I'll give you portfolio wide data real quick. So they are AL, so they have a full continuum, IL, AL, memory care. They have about 7 communities in the Northeast. And I asked them before we started working, I said, "Who's typically on your sites?" And she said, "Oh, it's always the adult children looking for mom or dad." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So, and I looked at all the content, and it was all speaking to the adult child. I'm like, okay. So as soon as Rubrik launches, the first month, 83% of the people that went through the tool were self-assessors, meaning people looking for themselves. And I get a call from them. And they're like, "Evan, what is going on?" I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it was, are you doing any campaigns that would target older
Mhm.
adults themselves? And they said, "No." Like, okay, well, let's take a look at next month. And the next month it was 75. So it was still this astronomically, like way.
Right.
And they're like, "Evan, we have no clue what is going on here." I said, "Well, let's take a look at your content. All of your content is talking to the adult children. As soon as you ask the question, is it the right time for senior living on your site? That is the first call to action that the older adults themselves are like, you know what, actually, let me go that route." And we're not designed to go one way or the other. We're for everybody. And so it was the first thing that was added to your site that allowed the older adult to engage and not
Agreed.
feel weird. And it was just fascinating. And then all of a sudden they started changing up their blog posts and the different content. They added a question in there saying, are you looking for yourself or are you looking for someone else? And then changing the website, again, the perception of customization, changing the website and what they see next based on who they are. That made a huge difference for them. Pull it back, and I think you ask anybody in the industry and they say, who is typically looking to these communities? They're always going to say mom. There's a reason the company is called what it is, the third-party referral agency, because that is overwhelmingly typically who everyone assumes is looking at these options. Pull it back and we look at Rubrik wide data across 50,000 completes last year. In one of our assessments, 49% were actually self-assessors.
And it's because I think trend-wise, generationally, we are not dealing with the same prospect that we were dealing with 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago when we started in this industry. For us. And I know that they're not only have their expectations changed, but like you said, their willingness to be involved in the process. They're not digging in their heels and staying home in much the same way that they want to be empowered and in control of those decisions. Unlike previous generations that we've worked with. So I love that. One of the things that I think is interesting, I love that you said test all assumptions. We did a book review of Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. If you haven't read it, oh my gosh, game changer. It's a great, great read. But what we realized in that he talks about testing all assumptions, and that when you are bounded by logic, you leave no room for magic, right? So you have those assumptions of I know who my prospect is, I know who my adult child is. We tend to, they get stuck. And one of the things that we do when we come in, and it's a little disruptive, but we look for those anomalies. Where are the anomalies? What pieces don't fit here? Because that's going to be where some of our key solutions are. But our core value of burning curiosity, I think, is the antidote to that apathetic assumption-based model of, interaction or messaging with prospects and with their adult children.
I couldn't agree more. I think just test everything.
Test it.
You never know. Change the words. Even just changing a few words within a call to action can make all the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Who are we to say this is what they'll be thinking at this time?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
I really appreciate, again, from the beginning of our discussion, that you have brought in like the emotional component of the psychological thresholds that these individuals have to go through. And even for the adult child, the mental gymnastics of coordinating family dynamics. The more we can offer them resources and support and empower them, the higher the conversion rate is going to be for our sales teams, and hopefully the longer our length of stays and residencies are going to be, so we can continue to improve results, kind of as an industry.
I think I've said this before. I'm just surprised anybody ever makes this decision. It is so overwhelming, and I'm not even the one making it.
I did it with my grandfather, and as a personal customer journey experience, and all the way through to I handpicked the salesperson and said, here's what you need to say to my uncle and my mom. These are the two decision makers. Let me walk you through. I'll hand you the sale. I've already done my homework, but you know what I'll tell you? Your original comment about not wanting to share pricing, that was a huge component for me. I don't have personally time to waste as the granddaughter. I don't have time to waste trying to track down pricing from 5 or 6 communities. I took the third-party route to test the experience. And let me tell you, that was heinous. The one thing that I will say that I took away from it is the solutions-based app that came along with that process has some value. As a model, not necessarily as a standalone entity at this point. But that is something that we've been discussing as well. How do we take our marketing materials and start to deliver them in a way that is included within the sales journey? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's just tons of room for improvement. And anybody that says that we made it probably needs to start seeing all the different areas that can be improved.
We've got a long way to go. And I think process improvement and optimization of experience is going to be really the next wave of what makes a successful provider. I think end-to-end, an experiential marketing approach, but a willingness to understand that your deliverable we've realized now your brand in senior living, what we're finding is your brand is no longer what you say about you. It is absolutely defined by what your residents and their families say about you. And they are saying it publicly in a lot of ways. So just kind of keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's use data. We're going to use data to disrupt, and we're going to keep moving forward. Thank you, Evan, so much for your time today. I appreciate you.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me. And anytime you want to talk about a different subset of data, I'm always happy to pull that out for you.
Absolutely. We love partnering with Rubrik. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you.